guys today, and we're glad that you have chosen to join us this morning for our online gathering, and it's just a pleasure to be with you today. And we thought it'd be really cool to just open with a song this morning. And we picked one that really just is a great reminder. I know for me personally, it's a great reminder of who God is and how great He is. Even in the midst of a hard time, there is so much good and so many great things about God in this time. And we just wanted to worship with you this morning. If you are in your pajamas with your family and you just want to sing together, go for it. If you just want to listen along, we just invite you to be where you are and who you are in this time as we sing this truth about God.
You give life. You are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only, God. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing.
that you are great and you are good and you love us and you are with us through all the things that we experience. And God, we just give you our love and our life this morning. In your name we pray. Amen.
Good morning, everyone watching at home. My name is Anna Stapleton.
And I'm Emily Stapleton.
And we're so happy to welcome you this morning. So, we're doing a few fun things this week. Yes, all of us. Everyone come and do this with us. Feeling stir crazy, a little bit lazy? Then don't make a fuss and join all of us. Use all your power to build a tall tower. Wait, you're not done with this media fun. Forget about Corona and pull out your phone. Here's a few simple steps on how to do this. First of all, be creative. Use anything in your house to build a tower, and any type of tower counts. Second, get extra credit if you add a cleaning item into your tower. Third, send a picture to coronatower@dullaschurch.org. We will be building a photo collage out of all of your tower selfies.
DCC has mobilized 4 response teams to help anybody that we know in the Dulles area who needs help. We're specifically helping with grocery and pharmacy pickups, and we're doing it while safely keeping our distance. If you'd like to help or join a team, simply email christinab@dullaschurch.org. And also, our leaders at DCC have set up 2 times per week for online prayer. This is just a time for us to get together as a church for about 20 minutes of prayer time. And these options are on Tuesday mornings at 9 a.m. or on Thursday evenings at 8 p.m. There's a link at the bottom of all of the emails that are coming from DCC that you can click on to join into the prayer time. And if you're not receiving emails from DCC and you'd like to, simply fill out the I'm new here form on our website.
If you have kids and want something fun for them to do, our Move Kids team is doing something really fun this week. They're doing a Spirit Week. For example, tomorrow, the Spirit Day is your favorite costume day. So wear your favorite costume, snap a picture, and send it to the Move Kids and Facebook, or the Move Kids Facebook and Instagram pages.
So in just a couple of weeks, so many of us have been affected financially by this crisis. We just want to remind you that this type of financial crisis can also affect church giving. So we want you not only to keep DCC in mind when you're thinking about your giving, but to remember that our giving reflects our trust in God. We have 2 safe and easy ways to continue giving to the church. One is through our website, dullaschurch.org, and the other is through our app, Dulles Community Church, which is available on the App Store. And also, it's hard to believe, but Easter is only 2 weeks away. And Pastor Brad is asking that we all collect the elements for communion in our own homes. So what that means is just have some juice or wine and some bread on hand, and Brad will take us through communion, yes, online, as part of our Easter celebration. And we just want to say one more time, we're so happy you're here.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. You could be doing a lot right now. You could be online reading more news or watching a movie or even reading more, learning more about the stimulus package. I'm really happy you've taken time to invest here with us for what we call DCC. This faith community matters to so many of us. And if you're watching in or listening in for the first time, I just want to welcome you on behalf of everybody else. We consider you family in this moment. My name's Brad, and I'm the lead pastor of Dulles Community Church. There's a world of mess swirling around us right now. I think that's an understatement. There are all kinds of concerns. I'm going to get to that. That's really the point of this talk. But I want to start today asking you what might seem like a really unusual question. Can you remember the last time you were in a boat? And I hope you can, because I love boats. I love being out on the water. It's one of my favorite things. I go to boat shows. I've had this dream for many, many years of someday owning a little boat. I've never owned one. I hope maybe I do someday. But Amy and I were on this big trip a month ago. Twice on that trip, we were out in the ocean on a boat. I go to boat factories. I was in one a few years ago in Florida to see how boats were made. I love it. I love being on the water in a boat. And so a couple years ago, not quite 2 years ago, Amy and I were invited by friends, a couple that live on the beach. It's their house. And they, when I say their backyard is a sand dune, I've never seen a back door so close to the sand dune. And just a few steps away is the water. And they keep a little sailboat just on the sand dune on a little trailer. And so we pulled it out that afternoon, evening, launched it, and the four of us had just the best evening. And we ended up watching the sunset and watched the stars start to come out. And so David's the guy, we took the girls back and dropped them off at the beach at the house, and then he and I loaded up the fishing gear. And the kind of fishing we were doing that night was, it's late night fishing. So we went out about 10 o'clock, and it was just like the picture perfect evening. Sitting under the stars, there's a bridge just off the coast that we could see, I'm not sure how far away, but twinkling on the water. He and I had the best conversation. I think if you're like me, if you fish and like to fish with other guys, I think guys that like to fish use it as an excuse to really talk, because that's really, I'm not very good at fishing. I really just enjoy the time. And he and I were having one of those conversations about life and marriage, and then he turned to me and said, "Did you hear that? Was that thunder?" And we both turned, and we could see in the distance lightning in a big cloud way off in the distance. And part of the sky was, the clouds were obscuring the stars. Like, it was obviously, weather was moving in. And he and I stupidly decided it was okay and it was far enough away. And so we kept fishing. And I'm guessing this was like 11 o'clock at night. And I can't describe here, certainly not in the time we have, what the next 45 minutes to an hour was like. Within about 10 minutes, the wind got so strong, the stars were completely covered, and we couldn't have the sail up anymore. So we wrapped up the sail, we pulled up the little anchor, and I mean the sky unleashed. And I don't remember the order of whether the ocean got rough first, or lightning was around us first, or the driving rain. I just know it was bad. Like, we were in bad, like super quick. And we were probably a mile and a half off the coast. I mean, we were out in the water. And I don't think we could see 5 feet in front of us. It was scary. I don't think either of us said we were scared or afraid in the moment. It was, 40 minutes later when we managed to get back to the beach, where we both were like, we were shivering, like admitting like, "Man, I'm so cold, I'm shivering too." And man, that was scary. I don't know, before this virus, what your most recent storm may have been. We all find ourselves in storms in life from time to time. Maybe it was a relationship storm. Maybe it was financial or job related. Maybe it was a parenting storm. What I know for sure is that we're all in this storm right now. We're all in this together. I mean, globally. I don't think, I really believe this now, since World War II, has the whole globe been caught in a storm together. I don't even think 9/11 affected the whole globe like this is. And so we're all in the same boat. And so if we're all in the same boat, I'm going to just really kind of shoot straight with you and tell you I want to be true to my faith and what I've come to really believe. I believe if we're all in this boat together, we're all potentially, depending on how open we are to this and to the story I'm going to read, I believe we are all going to find the calm and peace together that we all desperately want. And I believe it's found in the same source. And so I want to read you this short story. It's from the life of Jesus. He was in 3 boats at 3 different times with his disciples. And in this particular story I'm going to read, it's a very short story in Matthew 14. Mark and John, also eyewitness writers of Jesus' life, tell the same exact story. And just before the story, in all three cases, they tell the preceding story very much the same way, which was, and I'll keep this brief, but it's relevant to say this. The story that precedes what we're about to read is Jesus feeding 5,000 people when there was no food. All of this giant mob had come around to hear Jesus again. They're very hungry. It's evening, dinner time, and he uses 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish to feed thousands, 5,000 people. And what's relevant about this is that Jesus was wanting the disciples to be part of this miracle. He was wanting to give life and hope to all of these people with the disciples' help. And that was part of the lesson of that story. And so through all 3 gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, and John, tell that story just before what we're about to read. And I'll come back to that in just a moment. So Matthew 14, beginning in verse 22, immediately Jesus, following this miracle, this extraordinary thing that just left people speechless, including the disciples, immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him. They're probably wanting to help him dismiss the crowd. And he's saying, no, you guys go ahead. He dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. And he did this often. We see Jesus at times up early in the morning, spending time with the Father, seeking the Father's heart, praying for others. We know that part of his prayer here, we get a hint in just a few minutes that part of what his prayer is for the disciples, most likely. Later that night, he was there alone, praying, and the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. Now, Matthew's version here kind of makes the storm sound light. Because of the waves, because of the wind that's buffeting the boat, there's some waves. In John's version of the story, John 6, John says, a strong wind was blowing and the waters grew rough. Have you ever felt like God has just like sent you into a storm? I mean, I know I have, and I know you probably have. There have been those times where, if we're honest, whether we're like literally shaking our fist to the sky, or it's something that we say under our breath, or it's just something we're thinking to God, like, God, where are you in this? Like he's left us to fend for ourselves. There's something really interesting that we're told here. In verse 24, the boat was already a considerable distance from the land when Jesus is on the mountaintop praying. John says in his version that the wind was blowing and the storm was raging when they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles from the shore. So they're out in the Sea of Galilee, like considerably out, at least 3 or 4 miles. And Mark's version tells us that Jesus saw his disciples. And we know that he's not out of the boat yet. And that's part of where the story is going. Jesus is going to be at the boat with them. He's not there yet. He hasn't left yet, and he can see the disciples. So I, this week, looked up again. I've done this before, and I couldn't remember what I'd read. How far the human eye can see. And there's debates, actually. You would think this would just scientifically be like a specific distance, but it ranges between 2.6 miles to 3 miles. Somewhere in that range is how far the human eye can see, standing flat, looking towards the horizon at about 5 feet off the ground. And so what's interesting to me is that the human eye can't even see 3 miles. We know that they're at least 3 to 4 miles out in the sea, and that's not accounting for the fact that there's wind and storm and rain, and yet Jesus can see them. The disciples are this far away in this storm, and they can't see Jesus, but he can see them. And that has become so valuable to me through certain storms of my life that I've gone through, to read this and to understand that there are times where it just doesn't seem like God can see me, like he's just left me, like he sent me into the storm. I mean, he tells them, get into the boat, go on, I'll dismiss the crowd. You guys go ahead. It's like Jesus sends them into the storm. And they're in the storm, and they don't know where he is. They can't see him, but just in these few words, Jesus saw the disciples straining at the oars. I think we're learning something here really, really important about what Jesus does in the middle of a storm. We often, and I'm going to be honest, early in my faith, and still I think this is a temptation for me to default back to, is that I think God's role in a storm is to stop the storm. I do. I think that's kind of in all of our minds. In crisis, we cry out to God. And what do we cry out to God? God, fix this. God, make the world right. And it's interesting that Jesus does stop the storm, but not right away. And in that, we find the mystery of what God does and how he uses storms. He doesn't inflict pain on us. God is not, we talked about this last week, God is not the author. He cannot create bad. It's not in his nature. And yet, in this broken world, he often uses challenges, and in this case, a very serious storm. Shortly before dawn, this is verse 25, shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, and he was walking on the water. And this is that famous text, and regardless of how familiar you are with the Bible, more than likely you're familiar with the story, the famous story of Jesus walking on the water. This is it. And when the disciples saw him approaching the boat, walking on the water, they were terrified. And here begins the revealing of the mystery of what God does and how he uses storms to better us, how he uses what he has in mind to use the storm before he silences the storm. They were terrified. When they see Jesus coming, they're terrified. They think it's a ghost, and they cry out in fear. And so there's this word terrified. There's this word fear. They're already terrified of the storm. And now they're terrified of Jesus in the storm. And I don't know how that hits you, but man, I can relate to that. There are times I feel like God's left me alone in the storm, and then finally I start to see him at work, but it doesn't seem like he's silencing the storm right away. And I'm not sure I always like who God seems to be or how he appears in the storm. He's not doing what I want him to do in the storm. And it's just interesting that Jesus doesn't come immediately in this pleasant, warm, recognizable form. The disciples see him. They think he's so mysterious in the storm that he's a ghost. And so they don't know what to be terrified of, the storm or this body or image that's approaching them. They're terrified by the storm. It's a ghost, they said, and they cried out in fear. You ever find yourself afraid of who God is, or maybe what God is doing? Like when you know God is allowing the storm for whatever reason, that can be frightening to entertain that thought. Like, why would he? Like, what kind of God is he? And again, he's revealing so much about his heart to us as we get into the story. What he's doing is he's coming to confront their fear. Jesus is coming out into the storm to replace their fear with faith. And this can sound like a cliche, and I so hope that my words here convey what I really believe is the heart of God for us in this story. He is coming out. Eventually, he calms the storm. And I'll just go ahead and tell you the end of the story. He ends up going to the other side of the Sea of Galilee with the disciples to change lives and to give hope. And they've seen miracles, and they just saw 5,000 people fed with hardly anything. They haven't seen anything yet, and Jesus knows that. He knows that he's going to take these guys to the other side, and their minds are going to be so in awe of what he's yet to do and what they are going to be a part of. Jesus, before he has them be a part of the next level of extraordinary, there's something he's doing in their hearts and minds. There's something he's doing in the middle of the storm that has to do with their character. And so I've thought, before I read this next part, Jesus' job in the storm is to stop it. That's what I want him to do. God, I will reconnect with the people you want me to reconnect with. I'll be a better dad. I'll be a better husband. I won't put my trust in money if you'll just fix this right now. And there's obviously growing concern, not just about the spread of the virus. We're hoping we see this curve happen, the leveling of this curve here in the days ahead. Of course, that is front and center in our minds. What's happening in our hospitals right now, especially in New York, and now other hotspots emerging around the country, and the economy is gripping, I think, all of us. And I think if we're honest, we are being gripped by some level of fear. And some of that maybe can be healthy, but some of it is not healthy. And Jesus is coming to confront that. That's what he does in every storm. Peter saw this a little differently, and we see it in Peter's reaction. It's interesting that Peter does see Jesus as Savior. He does see him as rescuer, but not the way that I think maybe you or I would react in a storm, like, God, first stop the storm, and then I'll do what you want me to do. Then I'll spend my time. Then I'll reconnect with church. Peter's instinct, because of what he's seen in the miracles, and he just saw it the evening before, just hours before, he saw yet another extraordinary work of Jesus in that miracle of feeding so many people. Peter has grown to innately have this instinct where we see that he doesn't cry out, Jesus, if that's you, stop the storm. Verse 28, Lord, if it's you, Peter screams out into the storm, if it's really you, tell me to come to you on the water. So Jesus said, come. It's so interesting to me that Peter's instinct is not, if Jesus, if that's you, if it's not a ghost, if this isn't some just weird phenomenon happening in the storm where we're already afraid, if it's really you, he doesn't say, just fix this crisis we're in. His instinct is to say, the safest place to be is close to you. The best place for me to be, Jesus, if it's really you, is close to you. So tell me to come out to you. And Jesus says, come. Then Peter got down out of the boat, and now he's walking on water. It's like something transcendent happens in our lives when we're in crisis, and we don't turn to God and leverage God to fix the crisis, but we first say, God, I believe what you want most, what you want first. What you really want of my heart is for me to be close to you. That's when you hear people say that they see God using them in their lives and they have a peace that they can't describe and a calm that settles in on them. Peter is walking on the water toward Jesus, and then his default takes over. And this makes perfect sense to me. This sounds more like the way I think in this storm how I would have reacted. When Peter saw, when he put his attention on the wind, he was afraid. And here's this word again. We saw terrified, fear, afraid. Now here's the word afraid again. He was afraid, and he began to sink, and he cried out, Lord, save me. Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. You of little faith, Jesus said, why did you doubt? Jesus is confronting head on here this collision between fear and faith. There's something remarkable that I don't think we understand, that fear is trust. It's a version of trust. When we're afraid, when we're filled with fear, we're trusting the what ifs, and we're trusting what rages around us. It is a form of trust. We're putting our faith, or we're putting our trust into what could go wrong. And we talked about this a couple weeks ago. And we may be stepping into that 10%. I said that I've read that 90% of what we worry about and the what ifs in our mind never happen. Well, what if we're in that 10% right now, where jobs are at stake and jobs have already been lost, and this virus really has taken hold, especially in certain parts of the country? Our trust can be in the what if, in getting worse, what gets worse, how can this spin out of control? Our trust can be in what's raging around us. Jesus is trying to replace that, and that's exactly what the story is about. He has gone out into the storm, and before he calms it, before he gets everything back to normal and level sets nature and the sea, he's level setting the human heart. He's level setting something in the heart and the character of his disciples. And of course, these words are supposed to come off the page to you and me. Jesus is trying to get us to confront what I think we normally put our trust in, what rages around us, and what the what ifs are, instead of his power, his true ability to bring about good and to be moving us, even from the storm, into something extraordinary. On Easter weekend, I'm going to talk about what might be the most remarkable miracle Jesus performed. Just before his own death, he raised Lazarus from the dead. And that is where the news about Jesus and the exponential growth of the stories of Jesus just seemed to take off like wildfire, is after a man was raised from the dead by Jesus. All of that is yet to still happen on the other side of the storm. He's moving us toward good. He's moving us toward the extraordinary, but he wants to move us into that tomorrow. A part of his hope and work and using us to be hope in this world, he's moving us into those places, having changed something in our heart where we tend to default to people of fear, being people of what if, people who are focused on what's raging around us. A couple years ago, talked about this story in church, and a good friend, Kristen, actually framed this phrase that I used in the message, that God uses storms. He does something. He knows that we grow in a certain way. God knows that we grow in storms in a way that we don't in the calm. In fact, it's hanging on my wall, and somebody off camera, would you just grab that? We should have planned this. It's just, I think it's silly to be referring to this and not actually show it. Our good friend Kristen had this framed after I did this message. God knows we grow in storms in ways that we just don't in the calm. And I believe that as much today going into this storm as we're all in this boat, we're all in the same boat. I know it. I've seen it happen too many times in my life that Jesus in the storm, before he says quiet, calm to the waves and the wind, he is working to confront our fear so that we become people not of fear, not who are terrified, not who are gripped as people who are afraid, but people of faith, people of confidence that when I'm close to Jesus, the world is right. He is actually moving me toward a good place, a destination where lives are going to be given hope, and I get to be part of that. And again, I haven't mastered this by any means. There's still that default in me where fear can grip me, but I'm telling you, I've gotten better and better at this. The more I trust this story and stories like this. When they climbed into the boat, in John's account, we're told that the disciples invite Jesus into the boat, which I just think is kind of funny language. Like, after everything, they've seen Jesus walking on the water. They saw Peter walk on the water, like just mind-blowing kinds of things that are happening in the middle of the storm. They invite Jesus into the boat. When they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Jesus says, calm and peace to the wind and to the waves. Then those who were in the boat worshiped him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. There's something of a heart of worship that God is drawing out of us in the middle of the storm. In the other two stories, the way John and Mark tell the story, the disciples are just like, wow, what in the world? We thought that feeding the 5,000 was remarkable. We've seen you heal people. You teach with this grace and beauty like no one we've ever heard. Now, how do we explain that even the wind and the waves obey you? And they're worshiping. Those are expressions of worship. Like, what in the world? You are remarkable. And I know we're panicked right now. I know there's a sense of fear. I know that. I just sitting off camera here as one of my daughters, I just said starting here, hey, sweetheart, I want you to hear this. I believe this is part of God's heart. I want my girls. I can worry for my children. I can worry for so many of you. There are some of you this week who've lost jobs or temporarily, we hope, lost a job. I know that this is scary, but God's first priority in the storm, before he says calm, and he will. He is that God to say peace and calm. First, he wants to confront our fear, and he wants us to come to terms with what we put our trust in the most. Are we people who have learned innately? Peter had become that person. Maybe the other disciples hadn't yet. Maybe they needed to see someone say, I'm putting my trust in the fact that if I'm close to Jesus, even if I'm out in the waves and in the storm, if I'm close to him, then I'm okay. Because the creator of the waves and the wind, the one who commands the waves and the wind, if I'm close to him, my life is secure. And I know that he's taking me to a place of beauty, and I get to be part of his good. God is calling us to be people of anticipation. Fear stops anticipation immediately. It immediately stops us from being people of anticipation. He's calling us to anticipate we're going to someplace good. You haven't seen anything yet. You're going to see death turned into life and the ultimate of ugly turned into beauty. And you get to be a part of that, Jesus says. But first, I want to deal with what really grips your heart. That your confidence is in the economy, or your confidence is in life being okay if these waves just stop. Jesus is calling you and me this weekend. I'm just sure of it. I'm sure of it. And I believe this for my family. I believe this for so many of you. He is first using the storm like he's always done, like he's done for 2,000 years. He's using the storm, first of all, to say, hey, I'm in the storm with you, but I want you to learn that it's really being close to me when you're secure, when you're really secure, when you really have peace, when you really have confidence and calm. Bob Goff is one of my favorite writers and speakers. I just saw he posted this just a couple days ago, and it relates. It relates so closely to what we're talking about. He said, "It's easy to trust God when he does what we want. It's the other times when we grow." I know I'm getting emotional here. It's easy to trust God when he does what we want. It's the other times when we grow. And that's just another way of saying what we're talking about today. Before Jesus deals with the storms of your life, he will first confront your fear issues. And I'm just giving him permission to do that right now. I'm giving him permission. Before I yell at God, stop this storm, protect our country, protect the economy, protect jobs, protect lives, my first prayer, and I've learned this out of habit from reading these stories so many times, my first growing instinct, and I want to share this instinct with you, is to say, Jesus, if I'm close to you, if it's you who's close to us, and I believe it is, just tell me to come close to you. And I know the world will be made right. I know that is the sustained calm that I need. That is the sustained answer that our world needs. I just want to put this challenge in front of you. This is a time to decide, I think, to decide who's really our God is when the economy's good and my job is secure. That's when I feel confident about life. Scripture tells us that our God is the economy in those moments, that reveals or exposes that when I'm in control, that's me being in control is really my God. I think it's time this weekend, I'm going to say right now, to decide whether we're going to let go of control. And it's not dismissing what's happening around us. I'm not telling you I'm not really concerned about the economy. I certainly am. I'm concerned about this virus and the impact it's having on certain places and how it could maybe even affect us more acutely here in this local area, of course, in the Northern Virginia area. But we've got to decide whether we are going to be people gripped with fear who say to God, you do what I need you to do, and then I'll pay more attention to you, or if we're going to be people who learn from this kind of story that God uses storms to level set my heart, to build and grow in me the character that he's looking for me so that he can really use me the way he wants on the other side of the storm. And I'm going to pray with you here as we wrap up, and I'm going to invite you, maybe you've never really let go and crossed the line of faith and put Jesus in control and just said like Peter, like, if it's you, if you're real, if this is really you, then just call me close to your heart, because I trust that more than the economy, more than a secure job, being close to you is what secures my future. And if that's a decision you're making for the first time, or maybe for the 20th time, and you just want to renew that along with me today, I want to invite you to pray with me now. Jesus, and I'm just going to pray this directly to you. Jesus, you are not the creator of bad and ugly, but you masterfully know how to use broken places and challenges in this world to get our attention, to wake us up, to startle us out of the numbness of making material things our focus or our God or our security. And I just believe that so many people watching now are in that moment, in that space of needing to decide, am I going to feel calm and reassured when the economy is made right? Or is my calm and security in the closeness of Jesus? And so I'll just lead you in these words. So Jesus, I'm just doing that genuinely right now again, putting you back in control, or saying to you, as I've said to you so many times, I want you leading my life. You are the creator of the wind and water. You are the one who holds our future. You're the God of anticipation and the God of life and beauty. And you are taking us, you are trying to move us to the other side of the storm as people of character, people of faith, not people of fear. And so we just let you be that God in this moment. And I do pray that the storm will stop. I do pray that you bring peace to our country. I pray that you level our economy, but first, in the days and weeks ahead, we give you permission. We give you permission, Jesus, to be our God, and we lean into you and your presence being what matters most. Amen. I love you guys a lot. This series that we've kicked off today, All in the Same Boat, I'm going to continue here in the days and week ahead with another story of Jesus being in a boat with the disciples. There's so much we're going to learn from that story. I love you guys. You are not alone. And you're not alone because I'm saying it or just somebody speaking into a camera saying that. You're not alone because Jesus is the God who meets us in the storm. And I love what he's doing, what we're allowing him to do in our hearts right now because of where he's taking us and who we're going to be and the hope and life that we get to be a part of giving in the future. I'm glad you joined us today. I love you guys very much.